Christian Keller, welcome to the Executive Talk.
Thank you for having me.
It's a premiere. We have, for the first time, someone who has had the job he's having now before, meaning you're the second time around, you're the General Manager of IBM Switzerland. How is that, coming back to a job you've had before?
It's somehow interesting. I mean, you know what you left, and when you're coming back, you realize that some things are still the same, but some things have completely changed. So it's fascinating.
Is that due to the business as well, to the company? I mean, you stayed with IBM in the meantime, but coming back to Switzerland, to Zurich, did that show you as well the business changed, the themes changed, maybe the challenges changed as well?
Yes, some of the theme remain the same. We are still a tech company, and Switzerland still is Switzerland. But it was interesting to see how Switzerland and the corporate landscape in Switzerland adapted to the digitization. I mean, I was out 4.5 years, and to see, I mean, to the speed that Switzerland changed, also driven through the floating of the Swiss currency versus the euro, that forced many companies, particularly also mid-sized companies, to really rethink, to further innovate, to gain again a competitive edge, competitive advantage, to be successful and to have a future.
Before we come to those themes and maybe to those changes as well, let's talk a little bit more about your personal approach to that change. When you came back to that role, to that job, were you a different boss, for example? Did you change your kind of executive approach, your behavior, or would you say, I've always been the same Christian Keller when I was here first time or when I'm here now?
Well, I mean, basically, I'm still Christian Keller. And obviously, as you run different businesses, you automatically gain new experiences. So from this perspective, yes, I mean, Christian Keller today, I think, will be a different in 4 years later. I mean, hopefully, I'm learning. I might do a couple of things different, but basically, it's still one and the same person. There are some very basic attributes that didn't change.
Yeah. What are those? What are those values?
The way, for instance, how to lead the business. So setting the tone or being approachable. The way how you set the framework, allowing people to operate, etc., etc. So there are some very basic things that very core to your personality that remain the same. But still, depending on the state the business are, you might change the way you are setting some themes, the way you are coaching teams, etc. Because there is still a purpose that the company stands for, and you want to further advance. You need to further transform. So depending on the life cycle or the stage of the transformation you are in, you need to adopt the way you run a business.
And when you talk about your core principles, the core values that have remained the same, how did you get to those? Is that something you learn at the University of St. Gallen when you're a student, when they tell you, if you're an executive once, be like this or do like that? Or is that something kind of a learning by doing thing, or how did you get to this?
I think at the basic education or also the university education gives you kind of a tool set. So that's one element. But then, I mean, I'm a very strong believer that you need to learn particularly to lead by doing. I mean, you have marvelous, bright leadership concepts, but they're all worth nothing if you're not able to incorporate them, to translate them into the kind of the context. The context you operate is very, very important, and also combining it with your personality. I mean, being you is absolutely critical, in my view, to gain trust that you're able to advance an organization and to drive change and to have impact. I think these are critical elements that you can't learn. I mean, you can gain experience, but that's every personality has different kind of traits, and the toolbox that you're getting through leadership style You can have a look at them, but then you need to translate them how it works for you as a person.
For you, and I guess for the company as well, being in such a big company as IBM and as such a corporate giant, can you be you in that regard? I mean, do the people let you be you as you want to be and as you find fit for Switzerland, for example, or is there something like an American culture leading everything in those different countries and kind of almost forcing you to take those approaches on board?
I think you might be surprised, but there are very few things that are very strict with an IBM. We have 3 basic values, and they are valid across all the 170 plus countries we operate, all the geographies. Is one element that client success matters. That's one key driver for us. Secondly, that innovation is critical, not just for the innovation's sake, but really to have an impact. And the third is trust and personal responsibility in all relationships. These are very critical.
And those help, but I guess, as framework.
It is also kind of a framework we operate in. But other than that, we are very much federally, so to speak, organized. So this goes back to the founder of IBM, to Watson, that we respect the individual, and we were one of the very, very first that were driving the concept of inclusion, diversity, equal rights, etc., etc. So this is part of our DNA. We want people to be able to be the person they are. But I mean, other than these 3 basic values we are driving, I mean, we don't want robots. We want people being able to adapt to the local context, the local markets, the local geographies they are in, but adhering to the 3 basic values we are having.
But when you talk about the specific countries, for example, you've been in Germany, you've worked there as well for IBM. How was that to have a kind of a different corporate culture? And we all know the Swiss don't work like the Germans, and the Germans are different than the French and as the English and as the Americans as well. Does it take a lot of time to kind of adapt to those cultures as well? I presume you can't just go in there as the Swiss and try to lead with the Swiss leadership style.
Well, I mean, again here, I mean, I think the Swiss are closer than we very much think to German in terms of some of the basic behaviors. And being Swiss, having to deal with different languages we are having in Switzerland, different mentalities, I think there is a natural advantage we're having. But it's interesting to see, even Germany being a neighbor country, Switzerland, the way you operate, the way you discuss things, there is a difference even within IBM. I mean, while in Switzerland it's very much common to be approachable, to be open, pragmatic,
on a first name basis, for example.
First name basis, these kind of things. I mean, 4 or 5 years back, this was very different. It's far more formal. To get access to it, not the kind of the easy way, but this has changed dramatically over the last 18 to 24 months. But I recall vividly these years back. I mean, first time. I mean, yeah, it's different. But then you have an opportunity to open it up, and it worked very well.
When you talked about the founders of IBM, I was thinking of the history of IBM, which not many people might know how old that company actually is. I mean, we're talking about more than 100 years, 90 years in Switzerland already.
92.
92 already. So people probably tend to think IBM is just like one of those other tech giants. They haven't been around for that long. However, IBM, who has been around for that long, do you sometimes feel the company is almost like a dinosaur compared to these new players, the new big tech giants, for example?
Look, I mean, we are still very, very lively, despite our 108 years that we have on our back. And I think the reason why we are so lively and still one of the leading tech company in our industry is simply because transformation is part of our DNA. We had to transform several times. We were the ones who brought up the famous mainframes. We were the ones, and we just celebrated this year the 50th anniversary. Without IBM, the moon landing wouldn't have happened. We had several Nobel Prizes that we were bringing and winning in the forefront, particularly also here in Switzerland, who was the home of 4 Nobel Prize winners.
Coming from the research development.
Coming from the research. We were at the very beginning in artificial intelligence. We brought up in 2010 the Watson AI, where we got the prestigious GDI prize this year.
Kind of a supercomputer AI.
Exactly. So this shows, these are landmarks in terms of innovation and transformation and so on and so forth. And because we were able to transform, and we are still transforming, adhering to the new technology, to the new parameters that matters today. This is why we are still in business, and this is why we are still very lively.
On the other hand, is there a risk of doing too much? Because when you talk about IBM as well, it's really I mean, it goes from hardware to software to the cloud, which is a big topic for you as well. Of course, AI. Then we talk about those supercomputers, those new kind of technologies. In a way, it could be simpler if you just concentrated on one thing only and really try to do as much as you can there. Do you sometimes feel maybe our kind of way of doing business is so vast and so widespread that it might be too much?
Well, we are constantly looking at our portfolio, and we are very focusing in terms of, do we still have the right portfolio? Do we want to stay in all the businesses we are in? And so far, the answer for the business that we are currently running is a clear yes. For instance, there was a clear strategic decision at the end of the 90s not to go into pure application business, because these are our key partners in the ecosystem. And also by being very close to our clients, what they value from IBM is basically that they have a partner in the tech arena that is able to provide end-to-end solutions. And if you're looking today, the cloud is the way how things are getting consumed. There is a piece of hardware always in it, there is a piece of software, and there is a piece of service. And these are all 3 elements that we basically are in. We are still developing, designing hardware very much. We are one of the largest services company in the industry, and we have a very strong software business. But the borders are getting blurred and blurred. So this is why we feel right now with the portfolio we are having very comfortable. But we are, as I said at the beginning, very much focused in assessing, is the portfolio still right? We are doing every year some divestitures, as we see that this is not any longer to our core important, and we are doing some add-ons like the Red Hat acquisition that we just closed mid of this year, which was the largest acquisition we did in our history.
Which was actually one of the criticisms for a long time, that they don't add on things quickly enough, because there are so many new players, so many very kind of vast, kind of agile, fast players that might be a problem for a big player like IBM, that they can't move quick enough. Do you feel that sometimes as well, that we're on a, I mean, there's always that kind of the image of the tanker vis-a-vis the small boat that can change direction pretty quickly. Is IBM too big sometimes?
I don't think so. I mean, if you look and a little bit under the blanket, I mean, we were doing since years acquisitions every year. Just recall back at the early 2000s, we acquired PwC to further boost our consulting business. So Lotus Notes, etc., former years. So we are doing constantly acquisitions and divestitures. But obviously, the prominent ones, we are doing on little bit on a seldomly basis. Let's put it this way. And as soon as we see that we are missing an element to our portfolio, we are screening the market. If there is something that fits, then we're out. But we also very strongly looking into the ecosystem. That is tremendously important these days. I mean, to have the right set of ecosystem partners, that you're able to configure solutions that meet and create value for clients and meet their requirements.
When we talk about the area you work in, I mean, you're at the forefront of the digital revolution, and we're in the midst of that revolution, of course. And with that transformation come a lot of worries, a lot of questions as well. And you work in all those kind of very tricky topics. When we take the cloud, for example, what about the security of data? When we take AI, what about the machines getting maybe too powerful and maybe making humans not useful anymore in the future? In every interview, you're being asked about these questions, and of course, you're always kind of trying to explain that it's not going to happen so soon, and let's take the positive parts out of it. Does that sometimes bother you that in your line of work you're always a little bit confronted with the worries and with the worst case scenarios? No,
not at all. I mean, that's part of my business. That's part of the industry we are in. All what we see in them, this is what I keep constantly saying, and I think it's important that this gets understood. It's still human beings who are inventing, developing this kind of technology. And very much when it comes to the discussion about artificial intelligence, we strongly believe, and I only can speak here for our company, for IBM, that these technologies are here not to replace human being, but to augment their capabilities. It's man and machine. Mm-hmm. It's not machine versus man at all, yeah. Not at all. And there are some basic principles that we take very, very serious in terms of what is the purpose of a technology. It must be transparent. It must be explainable. If these attributes are not taken serious, then human being won't accept it, because it's in the nature of the human being that they would like to understand what's happening. Mm-hmm. If you take kind of a black box approach, then it will be very difficult that the technology gets accepted and getting used, and it creates fear, uncertainty, which is bad, and which is not helping to advance and innovate and bring up new solutions into the market. However, personally, do you have a fear? Do you have a worry that you would say, in my line of work, I mean, cybersecurity is one thing, of course, that you're always confronted with. But are there any other fears that you would say, here we really have to be careful, and we really have to examine this very well, because that could turn out completely differently? Yeah. Look, like in medicine, it's always about the dose. It's always how to use technology. I mean, you can use technology for the bad. I mean, absolutely. This is why it needs some rules, how to apply it, and a critical element is basically data. What happens to the data? And that's something we take very, very to our heart, mm-hmm. And we were one of the forefronts that clearly articulated the data always belongs to the owner, to our clients. We are not in the data accumulation business. Mm-hmm. We don't want. We are providing technology to get insights out of the data, helping clients to use the data to develop new business models, etc., etc. But here it comes then to some of the contextual situation. What in a society is allowed, you are doing business in, versus there are other society basic beliefs, principles that would allow to do with technology some other topics. Mm-hmm. So it's really very much the context you are in and you're using these kind of technology.
To be able to use those technologies needs a lot of kind of preparation, a lot of formation as well, which brings me to your kids. You have 2 teenage daughters. They need a completely different toolbox than when we were young, for example. Do you think the next generation is ready enough for everything that's going on, for all that transformation, or in what world will they live in 20, 30 years?
Well, we don't have the crystal ball, but what for sure, they are approaching technology without any fear. They're just experiencing if things are working, fine, they're figuring out new things. If not working, they are asking. So,
but are they better in that way than you are?
In some of the areas, absolutely. I mean, I ask them a new feature. They are very swift. They're just figuring out, and basically to be very open. I mean, in their free spare time, they are addicted. They're really figuring out. While for us, I mean, my generation, it's still a kind of a tool. But we are used to also very much the analog world, and we know what else is also available. And there is an observation I made that the younger generation, they are so addicted, have to say, to this tech gadget.
Does that worry you sometimes?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think as parents, it's always the kind of a challenge to find the right balance. I think it's absolutely critical that they grow up with the technology. They know how to use it. On the other hand side, the challenge is to make sure that they also understand focus has also a kind of a value, and also thinking has a kind of a value than just trial and error and tapping into this digital world.
Speaking of the right balance and speaking of family, you were once asked what your toughest school in life was, and jokingly you said growing up with 3 women in your household. You live in a household which is very busy. Your wife works as well as a successful businesswoman. You work a lot as well. How do you find that private balance between work and family, which is very important to you now?
So I mean, there is no one size fits all. I think this is a constant discussion and a very open, transparent communication. I mean, how to work joint together as a family, how it operates, and it requires respect to others, to the family member. And every now and then you need to take a decision. Well, it needs to work, and for us, it's important that the family works, and each member needs to contribute that it works the way that we firmly believe. That's how we want that this family stays.
Mm-hmm. A final question. In the same interview, you were asked what your biggest dream was. That was hiking with your family through Patagonia, if you find the time. Have you ever come to it?
Not yet, but we have to plan.
Christian Keller, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.